The change started subtly, a quiet fading, like the slow dimming of a gentle light. Mama, always so vibrant, so full of life and warmth, began to tire more easily. The forest walks grew shorter, then became just sitting by the cottage window, watching the trees sway in the breeze. Her laughter, once a bright, frequent sound in our little home, became softer, less frequent, tinged with a weary breathlessness. We knew, Papa and I, though we didn't speak it aloud at first. We saw the slow draining of color from her cheeks, the increasing fragility of her touch, the deepening shadows under her eyes. The healing herbs Papa gathered, the soothing teas he brewed, the gentle spells Mama herself still whispered. They eased her discomfort, offered moments of respite, but they couldn't hold back the fading. The life force, the bright flame that was Alara Meadowlight, was slowly, inevitably, being drawn down. The cottage became quieter then, filled with a heavy, unspoken grief. Papa moved with a subdued gentleness, his usual quiet strength now laced with a palpable sorrow. He cared for Mama with unwavering devotion, tending to her every need, his love a silent, constant presence in the dimming rooms. I tried to help too, fetching water, preparing cool cloths for her brow, reading aloud from her favorite nature scrolls, my voice trembling sometimes, my heart aching with a fear I barely dared to name. Redpaw stayed close to Mama always, resting his head on her lap, his warm fur a small comfort beneath her weakening hand. The seasons turned, summer fading into autumn, the leaves outside the window shifting from vibrant green to muted gold and crimson, mirroring the fading color in Mama's face. One crisp autumn morning, the air filled with the scent of fallen leaves and a fragile, golden sunlight filtering through the trees. Mama's breathing grew shallower. Her hand in mine grew cold, and her eyes, those warm, forest-green eyes that had always been my guiding light, closed for the last time. The world seemed to stop breathing with her. The cottage became utterly still, filled with a silence so profound it pressed against my ears, a silence that echoed the gaping emptiness in my heart. Papa knelt by Mama's bedside, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking silently, his grief a deep, silent chasm that seemed to swallow the very air around him. In the days that followed, Papa retreated into that chasm, drawing further and further away. He moved through the cottage like a ghost, his eyes vacant, his words few and far between, his usual gentle presence replaced by a hollow stillness. He still performed the necessary tasks, tending the hearth, preparing simple meals, but his heart, his spirit, seemed to have gone with Mama, leaving behind only a shell of the man I knew. The cottage, once filled with warmth and love, now felt cold and empty, a place of shadows and silence, haunted by the ghost of a loss too deep to bear. Then, one afternoon, as the autumn sunlight slanted through the cottage window, casting long shadows across the floor, a different kind of energy entered our grief-stricken home. A quiet energy, but one that was strong and as firm as an ancient oak. That afternoon, Elros Meadowlight visited us. He was a ranger within the Salinaries Covenant, a figure both Papa and I held in high regard. He didn't speak of condolences directly, not in words. His forest pool eyes held a deep understanding of sorrow, a shared grief that needed no words. He simply nodded to Papa, a slow, respectful inclination of his head, a ranger acknowledging a druid in grief, and then his gaze turned to me, a steady, knowing look that seemed to see straight through to the heart of my own quiet sorrow. To Papa, he spoke of the responsibilities they both shared, of the forest, of the changing seasons, of the balance of things, always shifting, always needing tending, a language familiar to those who protect the wild. And then, his voice low and resonant, he spoke of a gathering need within the covenant. "The Salinaries Covenant calls for aid, Bram," he said, the words carrying a weight of urgency and ancient responsibility. "Trouble stirs on the borders, shadows lengthen in the wild places. Protectors of the forest are needed. You are called to help." The words hung in the air, imbued with a significance that resonated deeply within our hearts. Papa's reaction was subtle, almost imperceptible. A slight tightening of his jaw, a flicker of his old alertness in his eyes, quickly extinguished by the deeper shadow of his grief. He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting back to the empty hearth, his spirit still tethered to his sorrow. He understood the gravity of such a call, the weight of responsibility to the forest. But his grief seemed to paralyze him, to render him unable to act. But I felt something stir within me, a familiar echo of purpose, a resonance with Elros's words that vibrated through my very being. Protectors of the forest, venturing into the wild, standing against darkness. It was what I had trained for as a ranger, intertwined with the teachings of Papa, what Elros had taught me, what Papa had always encouraged for all guardians of the wild. It was the path I had chosen, the purpose I had felt stirring within me since that first archery lesson, that first act of healing, that first desperate fight against the forest fire. And now that path seemed to stretch out before me, not just as a distant ideal, but as a real, tangible possibility. A way out of this silence, this grief, this suffocating emptiness. A way towards something else, something new, something my own, and something more than that now. A way to protect, to serve, to do something meaningful in the face of loss, in the face of encroaching darkness, to act on the call to protect the balance. And looking at Papa, at the man I loved and respected, at his slumped shoulders, his vacant eyes, his spirit seemingly lost in the depths of his grief, a new thought solidified in my mind with a clarity that felt both responsible and liberating. Perhaps I, not my father, should be the one to answer this call. Perhaps, in his sorrow, Papa needed to remain here, to find his own slow path to healing in the quiet of the forest home Mama had loved, to draw strength from the very earth he revered. Perhaps my path now, my ranger's path, was to step forward, to bear the burden of action, to offer myself in service to the covenant, to the forest, to the very balance Elros spoke of, fulfilling ideals of protection. That evening, as Papa sat by the dying embers of the hearth, his gaze lost in the flickering flames, I approached him, Redpaw quiet at my side. "Papa," I said, my voice soft but steady, "I heard what Elros said, about the call for protectors of the forest, about the Salinaries covenant." He turned slowly, his eyes focusing on me with a distant, unfocused gaze. "The covenant?" he murmured, as if the words barely registered. "Yes. Needs protectors. Troubles. In the West." His voice was flat, devoid of inflection, as empty as his eyes. Even in his druidic wisdom, the call seemed to reach him only faintly through the fog of his sorrow. "Papa," I said again, taking a breath, I think I should go. I think I should answer the call. For the covenant, for the forest. You need to stay here, Papa, to grieve, to heal. I can go. I'm a ranger, Papa. I'm trained as a protector. I can help. And it's time. Time for me to find my own path. To be a ranger out in the world. To serve as a protector of the forest." He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze still distant, unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded, a single, barely perceptible movement. If you think that is your path, Lidda Flower," he murmured, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it. But then his gaze shifted, just a fraction, and for a fleeting moment I saw a spark of something like understanding, or even pride, flicker in his forest green eyes, a faint echo of the Papa I knew. Then, perhaps you are right," he murmured, his voice gaining a faint strength. "Perhaps the forest needs you now, more than I do. Yes. Go, Lidda Flower, go. Answer the call as a protector. Let your ranger's heart and your druidic spirit guide you. Gekindus guide your steps, and keep Redpaw close." He looked back at the dying fire, his gaze drifting away again, lost in the shadows of his grief. He didn't meet my eyes again, but this time, his silence felt different. Not just empty, but accepting, almost blessing. A blessing for a journey of protection. The next morning, the cottage was filled with a quiet, purposeful energy, a stark contrast to the silence of grief that had filled it for so long. I gathered my few belongings, packed my pack, checked my bow and quiver, and made sure Redpaw's traveling pouch was ready. I left a simple meal prepared for Papa on the table, a silent offering in the shared grief, a small act of care in return for all he had given me. Then, with Redpaw at my side, I stepped out of the cottage door into the crisp autumn air and turned my face away from the glade, away from the forest home that had been my whole world. Behind me, the cottage stood silent, a small, shadowed shape nestled amongst the trees, holding its grief, holding its memories, a place where a druid would slowly begin to heal, drawing strength from the earth. Ahead of me, the path stretched out, uncertain, unknown, leading away from sorrow, towards somewhere. Towards what, I didn't yet know. But with Redpaw at my side, and the faint,